This is Between the Lines live at SanduskyRegister.com. I'm Matt Westerhold, managing editor of the Register, and today our guest is Dr. Cyril Wecht. He's a forensic pathologist who performed an autopsy on the body of Jacob Limberios. Jacob was killed on March 2nd, 2012, and Sandusky County officials continue to investigate the death, which was initially ruled as a suicide that might have been accidental. There's a lot of controversy in this investigation, and Dr. Wecht is part of that controversy, having given autopsy results that are in opposition to what Sandusky County officials have already found and appear to be finding again that Jacob Limberios had committed suicide. Dr. Wecht has a differing point of view, and we're going to be joined by him in just a few minutes, as well as Emil Whitus, our breaking news reporter, who's here with me now. We're going to be talking to Dr. Wecht in just a few moments after this message from our sponsor, Terra Community State College. For more information, go to terra.edu. This is Between the Lines live at SanduskyRegister.com.
Get in touch with your inner scientists. Transfer degrees in science, technology, engineering, math, and medicine at Terra State Community College. Start here, go anywhere. Learn more at terra.edu.
Are you the only one still using the book? Get found at Firelands411.com. Half of the internet users today will use a search engine to find a business. Make sure you're found at Firelands411.com, an all-local business directory with phone numbers, addresses, and more. Your customers are looking for you. Claim your free listing today at Firelands411.com.
Find your passion in healthcare at Terra State Community College. Start here, go anywhere. Learn more at terra.edu. Get in touch with your inner scientists. Transfer degrees in science, technology, engineering, math, and medicine at Terra State Community College. Start here, go anywhere. Learn more at terra.edu.
Are you the only one still using the book? Get found at Firelands411.com. Half of the internet users today will use a search engine to find a business. Make sure you're found at Firelands411.com, an all-local business directory with phone numbers, addresses, and more. Your customers are looking for you. Claim your free listing today at Firelands411.com.
Find your passion in healthcare at Terra State Community College. Start here, go anywhere. Learn more at terra.edu.
We're back. This is Between the Lines live at SanduskyRegister.com, and we're joined now by Dr. Cyril Wecht via Skype from his office in Pittsburgh, I believe.
Yes.
Dr. Wecht, thank you for agreeing to be on Between the Lines today.
My pleasure to talk with you, John.
Well, I appreciate it. We have been covering this story of Jacob Limberios' killing for about 13 months now, and you were called to perform an autopsy in September, I believe.
Yes.
And you were contacted by the Limberios family attorney.
Through their attorney, Guki.
Yes. And you performed that autopsy in September, I believe?
Yes.
Yes.
And what were your findings?
Mr. Limberios died as a result of a gunshot wound of the head. The bullet wound was on the left side of the head, and my gross and microscopic findings indicated that the shot would have had to have been fired from a distance beyond 18 inches or more. When you deal with a wound that is not tight, loose contact or close range, then you can't be precise. We can't say 2 yards, 5 feet, or so on. The range conservatively is definitely beyond 18 inches, and most often beyond 24 inches. You just can't give a number after that. But when you do not find stippling, the deposition of gunpowder residue tattooing on the skin, in this case the scalp, which after shaving the hair and so on, at the site of entrance, then you can know that the shot had to have been fired from a distance beyond 18 to 24 inches. Therefore, it follows that it is extremely unlikely, it just about reaches the realm of physical impossibility to hold a gun off a distance of 1.5 to 2 feet and shoot yourself. That then correlated with the information given to me by Mr. McGookie, the coroner's finding of, as I recall, suicide, but not intentional, or suicide that Mr. Lamberius may not have actually intended.
Might have been accidental.
Yeah, of course, that's an oxymoron. One need not be a forensic pathologist or a devotee of CSI programs to appreciate the absurdity of such a finding regarding manner of death. So suicide, accident is accident. I can say I never heard of anybody committing suicide holding a gun off 1.5 to 2 feet with the opposite hand, by the way. Mr. Lamberius is right-handed. That doesn't make it physically impossible for him to use his left hand, but highly unlikely. And then if you're going to shoot yourself intentionally, you're not going to hold a gun off. How can you even aim it? You could be Wyatt Earp or Jesse James. How are you going to aim it with accuracy? And if it's accidental, how does it occur accidentally? You could be fidgeting and fooling around with a gun for one reason or another. You could fall upon a gun. You could be cleaning a gun, but you're not going to have a gun out here and accidentally shoot yourself. So the whole thing just did not fit. And those were the findings which I submitted to Mr. McGookie.
Dr. Wecht, can you explain the difference between, or what exactly stippling is? I mean, I know you did a little bit, but is it the burning of the scalp from... Can you?
Stippling is what happens when the burnt and burning particles of the gunpowder strike the skin. They produce actual thermal injuries. The appearance is that which you would see. Take a piece of white paper, take a black pen, and just come down in perpendicular fashion and make a few dots. That's stippling.
Okay.
And then when you want to determine with more specificity the range of 2 inches, 6 inches, 8 inches in cases of close range, then you can take that same weapon or a prototype of that weapon, and then with white paper, or we use pigskin sometimes, shoot the weapon at different distances. And then you measure the circumference of the stippling pattern, and you can see, within a tight range, 1 to 2 inches, 4 to 8 inches, 8 to 12 inches. You see what I mean? In this case, we have no stippling. We don't get into a determination of that range.
Now, Dr. Wecht, there was a conversation between a detective and one of Jacob Lamberius's friends yesterday in Cleveland, and during that conversation, the detective said that it's possible that stippling was washed off during the preparation of the body for a funeral through the embalming process. Now, is that the case?
No. First of all, we did no washing. I'm sure that some washing of blood may have occurred, would have occurred by the funeral director in the preparation of the body following Mr. Lamberius's death. However, a washing, a rinsing, does not remove stippling. I've already said the stippling actually is thermal injury. It's a kind of a tattooing. It's superficial, but it's tattooing. It's not dirt and debris. You see, you have some that might fall off, but you cannot remove you do not remove the particles that have embedded in the epidermis by washing something.
Okay, so that contention by the detective doesn't seem plausible.
Well, no, that's it. He just is not a forensic pathologist, and he just does not understand then the actual pathological microscopic changes, the features of the stupid.
Dr. Wecht, can you estimate how many autopsies you've performed in your career?
I have done, since I began to do autopsies at the beginning of my residency training in 1957 to the present time, so you're talking, what is that? That's 50, right?
Yes.
56 years, right?
Yes.
So I have done about 18,000 autopsies myself. I have reviewed, supervised, or signed off about 38,000 additional autopsies. Of those numbers, and I don't keep specific count, but to be conservative, certainly of the 18,000 autopsies I've done, well more than 1,000 have involved gunshot wounds of different kinds. And of the 38,000 other cases that I reviewed as a consultant, medical legal consultant for families, for district attorneys, for private attorneys, and in cases sometimes from news media and so on, I would say of those 38,000, 2,000 or more have also involved gunshot wound cases. So that's my experience in dealing with autopsies that involve gunshot wounds.
Okay, and you recently provided tissue samples to Detective O'Connell. He had picked them up from your office, I believe.
Yes, we took what we had cut out as the gunshot wound of entrance, the scalp, and the piece of bone, and we literally cut it in half, giving him one half of the same materials that I examined, and they then are available for them to examine. I assume, I think it's a reasonable inference, you'll tell me if I'm wrong, that these several weeks have elapsed, that if they had come up with different findings, they would have spoken out. You guys and many others have been highly critical. Why would they be holding back? If they had results that differed from mine, then my God, put them out, not just in a defensive posture for themselves, but to elucidate, clarify, and deal objectively and honestly with the issues involved in this case. Well, to my knowledge, that has not been done. I dealt faith. I gave them the same materials that I examined, and I've never heard of them at all. How you tell me if you know something different.
Well, in the conversation the detective had yesterday, it appears he suggested that the evidentiary value of the tissue samples you provided was destroyed because the sample was stored in formaldehyde. Does that make sense to you?
You know, this becomes more disgusting as it goes along, as the how shall I'm looking for the correct word, to be polite, the disingenuous nature of these observations and comments by the detectives and others involved in this case, with pursuing the CYA principle with which we are all very familiar. I am personally offended by these comments, as I was by Dean Henry's comments some time ago that I think was it like Mr. Magucci paid for something, my services, and he got what he paid for. That is really defamatory. That's not only disrespectful, it is defamatory. It is absolutely slanderous and in print libelous, and there is no basis for him to have made that comment. For the detective's comment, first of all, he's not a forensic pathologist. he better not get mixed up with CSI programs where he thinks that homicide detectives are forensic pathologists and vice versa. That's number one. Number two, you don't remove the gunpowder residue particles, i.e. the stippling, by placing the tissue in formalin. You don't do that. If you have a tattoo and I cut it out and place it in formalin, you don't remove it. And it all isn't as if we've got something that's been lying around in formalin for years. We're not dealing with Lenin's body in Moscow or even Chavez now, and more recently in Venezuela, right?
Okay.
They came, I forget, was it a week or two or whatever it was, the time period. Court tissues are properly preserved in formalin. I am personally insulted, professionally bewildered, and amazed at the conduct of these people. And just go back to the way in which this investigation was conducted initially, not finding the missile, not digging it out, not really doing the kind of investigation and interrogation and so on. I mean, I just, less than a half an hour ago, wrote a letter of apology. Has to do with a totally unrelated non-forensic pathology matter, something that I'm involved in a kind of a socio-political religious matter. And I learned that I made a mistake. I just half an hour ago, I wrote a letter of apology to the people whom I had sent an earlier email. I have no hesitation or problem in apologizing and acknowledging a mistake or so on. What is going on here? I've been involved in some of the most controversial cases that we have experienced in America in the last 50, 60 years, going back to the JFK assassination and so on. I don't have to name them all or so on. And people can have different opinions, but you then support your opinions in the realm of forensic pathology and other forensic scientific fields through hard evidentiary matters.
Dr. Wecht, at this point...
And you don't hesitate to go in and study things objectively. These people have not done that from day one. And why? I don't mean to speak condescendingly or dismissively of the Lamberio's family, but these are private citizens. They're wonderful, nice people, I'm sure. But, we're not up here the assassination or the Robert Kennedy assassination or Martin Luther King assassination, a lot of these controversial deaths with which I continue to wrestle and continue to talk about. We're talking about an everyday occurrence in America, a tragic situation. My God, stand up, acknowledge your errors, do what you're supposed to do, and undertake an investigation now that you failed to do back last year, instead of insulting me and attacking things and making comments of an asinine nature of which you know nothing.
Dr. Wecht, the detective during that interview with Jacob Lamberio's friend said that they actually never had an intention to test the sample for stippling. They took the sample with the intention of comparing the DNA from that sample to DNA, hair, and blood found on the gun. Now, the hair and blood found on the gun, is that enough evidence to compete with your stifling evidence?
No, not at all. You two guys sitting together there, look at the transference of DNA between the two of you, reaching for a pen, holding a glass or whatever, passing a paper or so on. Picture, what were there, 3-4 people there, Jacob and some friends and so on, doing the things they were doing, shooting at varmints or whatever it was, I don't know, or so on and so forth. And think, young gentlemen having a good time and so on. No, the transference of DNA in that kind of a situation would make any kind of DNA testing for the purpose which these people are pretending to have undertaken meaningless. It in no way contradicts the findings. And furthermore, the comment that they took it not planning to examine it. And so first of all, that's continuing malfeasance, nonfeasance on their part. Continuing. In other words, not doing the test now is just a continuation of their investigative malpractice ab initio. And to have the audacity to state now that it was not their intention to do that, I'm honest to God, this is mind-boggling. I don't remember a situation like this where people are so absolutely clearly incompetent in what they have done, and who then have the temerity, the chutzpah to continue to rationalize and explain instead of just doing what they're supposed to do.
And it appears from the detective's conversation that his findings are that Jacob committed suicide, and that the final report, if it is ever released, is going to reflect that cause of death. Is there any way that you could see that was possible?
No, I've already expressed my findings, and I must say, then to repeat, I'm involved in adversarial, contentious situations all the time because I'm a consultant in civil and criminal cases around the country and sometimes in foreign countries. And I have no problem somebody disagrees with me. But if you're going to disagree on something that has to do with basic scientific findings, or you're going to disagree with something of an autopsy nature, gross and microscopic findings, then you have an obligation, scientifically, morally, ethically, and legally, in a court of law, to produce scientific evidence of a contradictory nature. You don't sit back arrogantly and say through some detective, well, we're making a ruling, or a local coroner or a sheriff. You don't do that, and you don't get away with it. Now, I am not involved as the family's lawyer, and I'm speaking for Mr. Maguki, but I am going to speak now for myself, and what I believe it can be done, and I'm going to suggest should be done, is you pursue this then, if you can get the authorities involved on a criminal investigative standpoint, to undertake a civil action. Remember, just O.J. Simpson is a good case that comes to my mind. So he walked it for whatever reason or so on, and then there's a civil action. When someone shoots and kills me, the DA will handle that criminally. My wife, as my legal next of kin, can then sue the person who shot and killed me civilly for damages, just as if that person had struck me with an automobile and killed me. That's a civil action. And in civil action, you have people under oath, and then you pursue this, and you bring in experts, and they bring in their experts, and then eventually you go to a jury. So now let's hurdle through time, and now we're in a courtroom, and you have the expertise here, presentations and so on, and then they come in and say, well, no, we didn't do any tests, we didn't find any stippling, we don't think it would have been there because the tissue was fixed in formalin or so on, and so on. Well, doctor, how do you think that's going to settle into the cerebral cortex, the minds of the jurors? If nobody in Ohio, locally, statewide, is going to pursue this, then I can only hope, and I want to repeat, I'm not speaking for Mr. Maguki or for the family, I can only hope that there would be another legal action through which this kind of presentation can be made, and all of the investigative discrepancies, inadequacies, and incompetence of the people from day one can be exposed.
And you're suggesting that in a civil case, they couldn't overcome the scientific reality of your findings?
Science doesn't change from criminal to civil. The only thing that changes is the level of evidentiary proof for a jury to wrestle with. In a criminal case, beyond a reasonable doubt. In a civil case, with reasonable medical scientific certainty, and so on. Probability versus possibility. So actually the burden is markedly lessened in a civil case. Okay. But the science doesn't change from one to the other. You still have to go ahead with the case. And I can only hope that will occur.
Dr. Wecht, I do have one question, again, brought up by the detective during this interview in the east side of Cleveland. On page 10 of the original autopsy, it talks about finding soot in the temporal region or in one of the bone fragments from the temporal region. Now, is there a difference between soot and stippling?
Well, yeah, they're different. I don't have the autopsy report in front of me. But the answer to your question is, yeah, there's a difference between soot and stippling.
And how would soot get into the wound, or into
could you read that to me? What does it
say?
Yes,
I can read it to you. It says the examination of fragments of bone in the left temporal region revealed definite blackening of the edge of one of the bones, consistent with deposition of soot. Soot is also seen in the subposterior rim of the same fragment.
Well, soot is carbonaceous material, and as the bullet goes in, you can have some deposition of carbonaceous material.
So, in other words, would that be the bullet being heated up enough that it? I guess I don't. Can you explain how that would happen?
Yes, that would come from the actual ammunition, right, entering into that region.
Okay.
And Detective O'Connell in that conversation also referred to, quote, major and, quote, minor DNA, suggesting that the local state crime lab could conclude that Jake was the last person to hold the gun from a DNA swab of the gun. Does that make sense?
No, DNA has no temporal components. We're finding DNA from thousands of years ago. You could have DNA of a murder today, and you don't know whether the DNA was deposited. I have such a case right now going on with the rape murder DNA, and the guy had sex with a woman, and so on. The big question is when was it deposited, and so on. So, no, the DNA does not have a time-related component.
Okay.
If I find DNA on the glass in front of you that you held, nobody can say that it was from the glass you held today or yesterday or last week or last month. If it can be found, it's there, and you cannot date it.
So this would be another example, perhaps, of the detective talking about things of which he has no educated knowledge.
That is correct.
Speaking...
I mean, this guy apparently just likes to talk. And I guess the people who are in positions of authority there are delighted maybe to just have him mouth off because he's not up for re-election or something like that. So let him be the spokesperson. I don't know, you'd have to ask them. But he does not know what he's talking about when he refers to a DNA that Jacob was the last person to hold a gun. There's no way that can be said. You can talk about what DNA is present, what DNA is not present, or this or that or so on, but you can't say that it tells you that he was the last person to hold a gun. You don't get layers of DNA deposition. It doesn't work that way.
And you had mentioned initially, have you seen cases before where sheriff's deputies throw out evidence, the blood-spattered shoes in the initial investigation? Have you seen cases like that before?
Well, yes. I'm not going to tell you that this is, the most egregious case or the only such case. Yeah, over the years, there have been cases in which clothing and other relevant physical inanimate objects and materials have been discarded, usually unintentionally, sometimes malevolently. I do not know why they were discarded in this case, and I have not ever suggested or stated that it was done intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
I have not made that statement, and I
Right.
do not make it today.
Right.
But I will say this. As we have moved ahead with DNA, and in the world of fiction and nonfiction, people have come to learn about all of these matters involving trace evidence, fiber evidence, et cetera, and as detectives and police have come to learn about these things, you don't find that sort of thing happening very often. I'm not going to say that it does not happen anymore, but it's pretty darn rare because just about everybody from an 8th grader in elementary school in America today has come to know about the transference of minute evidence, even that which cannot be visualized with the naked eye. It can only be seen with special lighting under the microscope, etc. I just don't understand. Are they still saying that what they did was satisfactory? Are they still saying that what they did is all that was required?
Actually, the detective and once again the conversation yesterday said it was the most thorough investigation, or one of the most thorough investigations he's ever done in his 25-year career.
And he suggested that his findings were going to be that Jacob Lemberios committed suicide and that they were sure of it. Could you talk just for a moment about that initial March 2nd, the county coroner made a ruling within 2.5 hours of Jacob's death. He had never gone to the home where the death occurred, nor did he examine the body or order an autopsy. Is that unusual practice for a county coroner?
Yes, I believe that it is. And remember, I've been coroner of Allegheny County for 20 years and chief forensic pathologist for 4 years before that. And I function now as the forensic pathologist for several counties, coroners and district attorneys in southwestern Pennsylvania, as well as my private consultations. But let me, as part of my answer, point out to you, look at the inconsistency, the dichotomy between that statement and the statement of the detective. How, if a coroner made a ruling in 2.5 hours, is that consistent with and supportive of the detective's statement that it is the most thorough investigation that he ever undertook? Think about that.
He is saying since the coroner's inquest.
It's absolutely enough to make you laugh if it weren't such a serious matter. But how could, and the coroner not going, he doesn't know what the interrogations of the other people have been. They haven't been submitted. And then going back physically with regard to matters that the detective was involved in, finding the bullet, digging it out, collecting other things, et cetera, that's a matter of record. Correct me if I'm wrong. How dare he say the effrontery, the audacity, the unbelievable, unmitigated gall for him to make such a statement? He should be ashamed of himself.
Well, actually,
the record, not what Cyril Wecht says, the record shows that what he's saying is completely antithetical to what transpired.
Well, actually, Dr. Wecht, the detective yesterday, he actually came into the investigation after this.
The coroner
had the rule. Yeah, he came in after the coroner asked him to come in. And
your point is still well taken.
Yeah, in November, I believe.
And I would point out that the questions we are asking you now are the same questions we've asked the detective, are the same questions we've asked the special prosecutor, who has declined to address any of these questions and others about conflicting statements that both he and the detective have made on this case. So we've given them more than ample opportunity to address these concerns.
I believe you have. And I want to ask another question of you, gentlemen. Did I not read in one of the articles sent to me from Mr. McGookie that a detective, I don't think he was named, had said something about, or was it a witness, or the detective's comment about what a witness had told him that was inconsistent with that conclusion of suicide? I'm sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There was an email where he had concluded, this same detective, the detective that's handling it right now, there was an email sent to Mr. McGookie, and it verbatim says that, in his opinion, it was a suicide. Or it was a homicide.
Right, the detective.
The same detective?
Yes, we've asked them about those conflicting statements that they've made.
What has he said?
Well, he's changed his mind. This was before he interviewed any of the witnesses to the shooting.
And I imagine that Special Prosecutor Dean Howard and possibly Detective O'Connell are watching this program now. And again, they've been invited to be on this program. They've been invited to answer these questions, but Dean Henry has steadfastly refused to answer any of these questions. He has suggested that the reporting in the register has been inaccurate without articulating that or substantiating it. So our frustration is similar to yours, perhaps, in that simple questions are not being answered.
Yeah, well, that's great. And, as we wrap it up, and we've discussed matters of definitive, quite specific forensic scientific nature, I want to harken back to something that is less scientific in many respects, however, something that certainly more people can understand and appreciate, and which says a lot too. That you're sitting there now, I'm sitting here, and I feel, I'm embarrassed by my work in this case. I'm going to commit suicide. Okay, so let's just take this hypothetical and so on. So I have a gun. All right, okay. I take the gun. I shoot myself in the chest. I shoot myself in the forehead. I shoot myself in my mouth. I shoot myself here. So why would I? And I'm right-handed. Why would I take a gun, reach back here, and shoot myself toward the rear of the head on the left side? Not physically impossible. I'm not suggesting that one has to be a contortionist to do it. Why? Why in the world would you do that just physically? Before you get into the psychological background, and by the way, we haven't talked about that, and I really don't know. I don't know if I know much, if anything, about Jacob Limberius and so on. But I would like to ask you, what has come out from the psychological investigation? What do you know about Jacob Limberius? Well, again, I know people commit suicide for reasons sometimes which are inexplicable, etc. But is there anything there to suggest that he had suicidal ideation?
No, not at all. According to everyone, friends, family members, he was actually he was in a better state of mind than he normally was that night. So,
and the circumstances of that evening don't suggest a person who wants to commit suicide. They're in a social setting.
Nothing expressed orally, behaviorally, nothing like that.
Nothing.
So if you took all of the other information away and you just looked at the circumstances, you might not even think that this was possibly a suicide.
Yeah. Good. And that's why I brought it up as we conclude our discussion, because sometimes common sense even overwhelms is more important than things that one hears from experts, right?
Yes.
So let's not forget common sense. Let's not forget things of a basic human behavioral matter, etc., as we consider this case.
Yes.
Don't forget them.
And I appreciate that.
Before you get into the specific pathological and forensic scientific findings and interpretations thereof, just think about what was the original scenario, who was involved, and then correlate that with their ruling of it being a suicide.
Yes.
Really quick, Dr. Wecht, you are a lawyer also, aren't you?
Yes, I don't really practice as a lawyer, but I'm licensed, still licensed before the courts, Pennsylvania and federal court, even the U.S. Supreme Court. I haven't argued a case before the U.S. Supreme Court recently.
Okay. Are you familiar with court ethics? Pretty well. I mean, obviously. More
so perhaps than I was going to say as every attorney, because I'm in court, so much. So
right.
I'm aware. I've been made aware of judicial ethics, of conduct by attorneys, and conduct by witnesses, experts, and so on. Yes, I wouldn't say I'm an expert in terms of judicial legal ethics, but I certainly know something about it.
Okay, well, I just wrote a story not too long ago about Special Prosecutor Dean Henry's dual role as prosecutor in the Limberios case and also representing the coroner in the civil case. Do you see a problem there?
There is no question at all about the impropriety, the absolutely inappropriate dual role. Again, an example of what I've been talking about when I referred to my inability to comprehend how these people are behaving. Mm-hmm. How can anybody? You don't have to be a lawyer. Forget law school. Just go to a 10th grader in high school. Why don't you do that, gentlemen? Really, Go to high school.
could
Go
do
to
that.
your local high school. Go to your local. Just grab 100 kids and say, and leave out the personalities, leave out the names, leave out the situation. Just say there's been a death, and it's controversial. It's under dispute, and so on. And it's being looked into. Make it, just totally generic. And then say to ask these high school students, you want to do it at a college level, do it whatever level you want to. You want to do it with people on the street, and say, hey, so I want to give you this hypothetical scenario, and then ask the question: do you believe that the same individual who is representing the people who have made decisions on one hand involving this dispute should be the same individual who is conducting the quote independent, objective investigation? And if you get, I was going to say one. If you get 2 people out of 100 to say that, then you guys will be my guest at the most expensive restaurant in Pittsburgh the next time you visit.
We're on it.
Okay, well, if Dean Henry is one of those 2 people, is that okay?
We're not going to count him.
Okay. All right. And I would.
But I mean, just to remove the levity. I mean, how can anybody? And this is another source of total bewilderment. I just don't understand. This has nothing to do with Limberio's in case. How can anybody do that? What you tell me, gentlemen? What is the answer to this? By the way, do you have? I know you've raised this, and I read it, and I commend you for having pursued this. What has been the answer from him, and what is answer from people who have authority over him as to his playing this dual role? What has been their answer?
Well, Mr. Henry has not answered the question. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah.
I guess we asked him. Do you see an apparent or potential conflict of interest? And his answer was no, sir.
And also the judges, at least one of the judges that actually appointed him as special prosecutor in the criminal investigation, chased me, or her secretary chased me out of the office. So
for asking the question.
Yes.
So we're bewildered and we're disappointed. Mr. Henry is generally available to provide non-responsive answers to our questions, but non-responsive answers don't bring any value to the table.
So you guys really have been wonderful. I'm not saying that to be amicable or just, but the way your newspaper has pursued this is certainly, without you, of course, Limberio's family would have a very, very difficult time. So what will occur down the road remains to be seen, to be determined by the family in consultation with their attorney. And I'm sure we'll probably be in touch with each other some more down the road.
I appreciate it. Dr. Wecht, thank you very much for being on Between the Lines today.
My pleasure.
All right.
Thank you, Doctor.
You have a
Is
good...
it possible? Is it if there's a disc or whatever you call it of this? I would love to have it.
We can get you connected with that.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you for being with us.
Have a good weekend.
You
Yeah,
too.
you too.
We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back in just a moment. This is Between the Lines live at SanduskyRegister.com.
Charlie, we close it down here.
Get in touch with your inner scientists. Transfer degrees in science, technology, engineering, math, and medicine at Terra State Community College. Start here, go anywhere. Learn more at terra.edu.
Are you the only one still using the book? Get found at Firelands411.com. Half of the internet users today will use a search engine to find a business. Make sure you're found at Firelands411.com, an all-local business directory with phone numbers, addresses, and more. Your customers are looking for you. Claim your free listing today at Firelands411.com.
Find your passion in healthcare at Terra State Community College. Start here, go anywhere. Learn more at terra.edu.
We're back. This is Between the Lines live at SanduskyRegister.com. We've just been talking to Dr. Cyril Wecht, a forensic pathologist who performed an autopsy on the body of Jacob Lemberios. He determined that Jacob Lemberios was killed by way of a homicide. Sandusky County officials, including Sandusky County Special Prosecutor Dean Henry, appear to still believe that Jacob Lemberios committed suicide that might have been an accident. That's the information Detective O'Connell provided to a witness yesterday.
That's right.
So, Emil, where do you think this goes from here?
I quit trying to figure that out a long time ago. All I know is that we'll keep following it as far as it goes. You know, I have no idea. We need answers. We need some dialogue with Dean Henry, at least a little bit. We don't necessarily expect everything that he knows at this point. We would like to have the full investigative report. Of course, we would always like to have those, and we end up fighting for months for them. But just to have a little dialogue would be great. I know that he said that he's been misquoted before. I absolutely disagree with that, but I just don't understand how he can just put up a wall like this.
Well, if I remember correctly, and I believe Mr. Henry is probably still watching, there was one instance in which Mr. Henry suggested that he was misquoted.
Right.
And that dealt with comments he made about Dr. Cyril Wecht. We stand by the quotes as being accurate. And subsequent emails that we received, which appear to have been penned by Dean Henry, support the quotes that he was objecting to. So we're still trying to understand that. I have had correspondence with Dean Henry over the past few weeks in which I've asked him a series of questions regarding the conflicting statements that he has made that conflict directly with the statements O'Connell has made. And with the statements that O'Connell made yesterday to a witness, a member of the public, O'Connell now appears to be self-contradictory, where he is saying one thing at one time and saying something that is opposite or counter to that at another time. We have asked Mr. Dean and Mr. O'Connell to help us understand those conflicting statements. Now, we do not know whether what Detective O'Connell told Brady Gasser yesterday during his interview is what the report will say in the end. He indicated to Brady Gasser that the report will show that Jacob Lemberios committed suicide. One of the questions I asked Dean Henry this morning in an email, to which he did not reply in a responsive fashion, was there are times when police detectives mislead witnesses and give witnesses inaccurate information in order to seek information from them. Does that make sense? I think most people know that yeah. In the course of an investigation, police officers and detectives do have a certain leeway to be inaccurate in what they tell witnesses. And I asked Dean Henry if that was the case here with what O'Connell told Brady Gasser yesterday. And furthermore, it makes no sense to us, and perhaps there is a valid reason why Brady Gasser would need to be interviewed again.
Well, and that's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, this kind of gets off what you were talking about a little bit, but one of the most interesting things that's happening right now is that Jacob Lemberios' friends and family have been there constantly since the beginning, and they have not accepted what deputies and authorities have said. But now they're really the opposition to. I should say the support for an outside investigation is growing, and that's, I believe, would be the reason that Detective O'Connell met with Brady Gasser, who started up a Facebook page, which now has 1,000. There's 15
more than 2,000 signatures on an online petition asking Ohio Attorney General Mike DeWine to step in and take over this investigation.
Right, and I should give credit to Luke Eddy, also one of Jake Limberios' friends. Luke Eddy and Brady Gasser started up this page, and now it appears that authorities view the page as a threat because of its grassroots power, I guess.
And so, that perhaps is one reason Detective O'Connell might have wanted to meet with Brady Gasser, because he is involved with the Justice for Jake Facebook page.
Right, and he also, we should probably say also that that there weren't necessarily threats made by Detective O'Connell, but he did bring up the Facebook page, and he did say that Gasser was, whether he meant to or not, obstructing the investigation.
He did say that?
Yes, at some point.
And that was one of my concerns when I first heard that Detective O'Connell was meeting with Brady Gasser, that it would be an attempt to slow Brady Gasser down with his effort to get an independent and competent investigation of the death of Jacob Limberios.
I should clarify that last statement. What I am saying is that O'Connell said that whether Gasser meant to or not, by posting what he's posted on the Facebook page, it is harming their investigation, or it has the potential to harm their investigation. And he never came out and made any kind of threats. I will say that hands down. But he definitely brought it up, and he said if it was me, I would take that stuff down.
And there didn't seem to be, from what we've gathered, it didn't seem to be that O'Connell was interviewing Brady Gasser to gather information. It seemed it was more of a one-way conversation in which O'Connell, for some reason, was dictating his report that he had provided to Dean Henry to Brady Gasser, and suggesting that the report, his final conclusion, is that Jacob Limberios committed suicide. So it's hard to understand why you would need to go to Cleveland in order to tell Brady Gasser information when it doesn't appear that they were seeking any information from Brady Gasser. So this is, a continuation. I think it's safe to say that the initial investigation, which took 2.5 hours, was botched. They left the bullet in the ceiling. They did not order an autopsy. They sent the body to a funeral home within 2.5 hours or so. One witness discarded blood-spattered shoes that he was wearing, which I believe Sheriff Overmeyer has acknowledged in a very carefully worded email. And another witness likely discarded the clothing she was wearing when the killing occurred. So the initial investigation, which was over in 2.5 hours, was botched. Now we're 13 months later, and the special prosecutor, who billed $8,500 to county taxpayers last month, is still no closer to a conclusion and has been completely unable to answer any reasonable and legitimate questions that he's been given. And it is perplexing. We certainly don't know why this is happening the way it is. But we will continue to follow it. As I've mentioned to Dean Henry, and I'll mention it again, just because you refuse to answer the questions does not mean the questions are not legitimate. And just
or that the questions will go away.
Yeah, they're not going away. We'll continue reporting on it. And with that said, I think next week there's a protest planned by the Justice for Jake group at the Sandusky County Courthouse on the 11th of April, I believe. We'll be reporting on that. And the big news here, the new news event, which I indicated to Dean Henry this morning, is that Detective O'Connell has suggested the tissue samples were destroyed. So that would be another piece of evidence that has been destroyed in the process of this investigation, if his contention that occurred is accurate. So stay tuned. Emil, I think you're going to have a story this weekend
Yes.
on Saturday or Sunday. So make sure to buy the Register on both days and buy 2 or 3 registers on both days. You can go to the Jacob Limberios saga at SanduskyRegister.com. We have an index of stories that we have done over the past year on this topic. We'll continue doing stories until this reaches some sort of conclusion. It's likely that if the report looks as O'Connell made it appear it will look, that the civil case will go forward. Our reporting will continue. So that's where we are. That's where we're going. Mr. Henry, you're welcome to call. You have my number and answer these important questions. And most importantly, provide answers to the Limberios family. They've been waiting 13 months, and you should provide those answers as a public service. I think that's it.
Yeah, I don't have anything.
Jason Worley, our producer who made all this happen. Thank you, Jason, for being your extraordinary self once again this week.
You're welcome. Thanks.
And next week, Jason will have a mic. We just didn't have one for him this week. This has been Between the Lines Live at SanduskyRegister.com. Thank you.